Hey everyone, I'm Conor from Villagers and you are watching Tower Recommended. Well, the first album that I recommend is an album called Odyssey and Oracle by the Zombies. I feel like it's kind of a bit of an underrated masterpiece. You may notice that Odyssey is spelt incorrectly. The band's friend who did the artwork only realized just after he finished the artwork that he had misspelt Odyssey. So when they were doing the press for the album, they pretended that it was on purpose and they made up all these extra things about the reason they, poetic license and all that kind of stuff. It's an unbelievably beautiful album. It's kind of like, it sounds like, a million flowers blossoming, and it was engineered by Jeff Emerick, who did all the Beatles stuff, which is why it sounds so good. Well, one of the reasons it sounds so good.
Tell it to me slowly, tell you why I really want to know. It's the time of the season for loving.
The thing I love about it most is that it's so nostalgic. There's so many songs which feel really warm and really familial, but then there's a song about, like the first song, Care of Cell 44, is like a song about is basically a letter to a prisoner and saying, I can't wait till you get out and stuff. So there's this weird kind of mixture of like the structures of society and history and then just this childlike beauty as well. And I love the way that's kind of represented in the album. And I think you can kind of see it on the album cover. And maybe he misspelled it because there's a sort of a friction and he just wanted the E to be there because it represented everything. And that's it. That's Odyssey and Oracle. So this album is a new album. As Dylan once said, there's a lot more older albums than there are new albums, which is why I don't bother listening to new music, but I do. And this one is, I feel like this is an instant classic. It's called A Beginner's Mind by Sufjan Stevens and I'm going to get it wrong, Angelo the Augustine, who I've only just started listening to, whose own music is very amazing and I would recommend it highly. And it's loosely based on movies that they both watched each evening as they were recording. So they would watch like Silence of the Lambs or Return to Oz. They would decide the next day that they were going to write a song based on that movie they watched. But what happened every time was that inevitably it became something more about existence, and like the Silence of the Lambs one became a song about Buffalo Bill, the psychopathic murderer guy, questioning the director of the movie himself, as if the director of the movie was some sort of deity who had created him. And so it becomes, there's references to the movies, but then it also, the songs just turn into something much more existential and questioning of life, and they're just so beautiful.
I just want you to love me. I just wanted to change myself. Fix it all, Jonathan Demi. Beauty resides where your spirit dwells. I just want you to love me.
There's a lot of what Sufjan does best, which is making the messiness of life something extremely graceful, and you can hear all of the work that went into the music, because it doesn't sound like there was it sounds like they kept changing their plan, which I think is what creativity is, and that's what I like. So yeah, it's really cool. Actually, the album art is by an artist from Ghana. Apparently the 80s in Ghana, they used to, when a movie would appear, they'd have to watch it at the back of a truck. So this guy used to make posters, especially for each movie that they would watch. And I think Sufjan and Angelo asked him to do the same thing for this album. So he listened to the album and then just made this crazy artwork. And there's a few more posters that he did as well, and it's really cool. So yeah, that's A Beginner's Mind by Sufjan and Angelo di Augustine. Recommended. Tower recommended. So the next one is Nina Simone, Silk and Soul. I almost didn't want to talk about this because I find it's almost a bit too obvious, because I think Nina Simone has been renowned as the genius that she is eternally for a long time, but I'll never ever stop listening to her. And this album in particular, I love a lot of her albums, but this one is just so good. It has so many aspects to it which blow my mind on so many different levels. Like, it begins with the funkiest drum roll and the funkiest like drums, the most beautifully recorded, amazing string arrangements, but then her voice comes in and her piano playing, and it just blows my mind every time. I feel like every time I hear it, it's like the first time I've heard it again. I just suddenly feel like I'm high on music, and it's amazing.
When your God has got his hat and made himself hard to find, it doesn't mean.
I think she only has one song that she wrote herself, which is the song Consummation. Such a beautiful love song. Like, I remember hearing it for the first time about 10 years ago maybe, and I was just blown away by its grace and humility. This is an album that, for anyone who wants something to groove to, but also to have moments of solitude with as well, it's all here. Everything is here. It's super rounded and super intense and super chill and super everything. It's just super album. Super Nina. Also, her brother wrote the first song, which is one of the best songs ever, and he's still doing his thing. He's deadly. All right, here you go. Woo! Nina Simone. All right, next one. Tower Records recommends, Conor O'Brien recommends Sigur Ross. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but it's Ágætis Byrjun, and I'm so sorry to any Icelandic people who might be watching this right now. But the reason I actually chose this when I saw it in the Tower racks was that I remember seeing it in the Tower racks in Wicklow Street in Dublin years and years ago, just after it had come out. Or maybe it was actually, I remember seeing the album after this, Tack in the Racks, but I remember just getting into them when this one had come out. And this particular album is one of those, you know, when you have those moments when you remember so much about taking stuff in when you're at a certain age, when you're young. And there's like moments on this album where the drums just are so well produced and so, like, there's been so much thought and effort put into how everything is placed and how the atmosphere is. I just remember having so many eureka, moments when I was a teenager with it, and it just blew my mind over and over again. And it kind of felt like they were like my Pink Floyd or something, because like my brother was into Pink Floyd and all that stuff and prog stuff, so I kind of grew up listening to quite a bit of prog music. But then this album actually came out, and it was like a new album, but it sounded like it was doing similar things that the prog stuff was doing, but in a new way, and maybe even, I think even in a funky way. Some of the drums get super funky, and but it's not even, you can't really place this album in any sort of genre, because there are moments when it just, every time I listen to it, and I return to it occasionally, but when I do listen to it, I just get transported, completely immersed. there are moments that every time you go back to it, you forget that you're like, oh, I forgot this bit, and suddenly you're in it and you're like, oh my God, this is like, it's absolutely incredible music, and it's a cool album cover as well. Yeah, Sigur Rós, Ágætis, boom. Recommended. All right. Yeah, this is an album by an artist called Björk, who you may have heard of, and it's called Vespertine. I love it very much. I actually listened to it again recently because I was doing a thing for a radio thing. So I picked up this thing called Vespertine, and I was instantly again transported back to. I think when it came out, I just started going to college. I remember this kind of soundtracking my feeling of freedom from being in school and stuff. And there's a song on it called Hidden Place, which I think was the single, maybe it was the first single from it. But when I hear that, I'm just, again, instantly transported back to that moment. But I think my favorite song is a song called Cocoon, which is the second song. And it's super sensual and intimate, and it's like she's inviting you into. I actually couldn't, but I remember hearing it for the first time and going, you can do this? You can actually invite someone into your own super private world and just like express to them how it feels inside of your body. And there was just really. I think that Björk I think she has so many breakthroughs that she's always rewriting her own rules, and this was an album where she was definitely doing that. You can hear her constantly having creative breakthroughs over and over and over again. So it's like fireworks going off inside someone's head, but you're hearing a document of that, you know.
And I wake up a second time in his arms, gorgeousness. He's still inside me. Who would have known?
So yeah, it's a pretty cool album. I would recommend it highly. Björk, Vespertine. All right, and then this album is a new album by an amazing new artist. I'm allowed to say that, I think, because I think it's his debut. It's a guy called John Francis Flynn, who I remember seeing for the very first time opening for E Vagabonds, who were also amazing that night, in Whelan's, probably in like 2000 and before times. And he was super charming. I remember he was so funny in between songs because he just held the audience in the palm of his hand with this kind of stoic kind of quietness to him. And he would make these little quips, whatever. But then when the song started, it was definitely serious. And I really liked that sort of friction again. With this album, he's done something which, I mean, I had some sneak previews because somebody who plays in Villagers kind of produced the album, Brendan Jenkinson, and he did a lot of work on it as well. And there was lots of tape loops, and so I had a little sneak preview because when we were doing the Villagers album and beyond, John would be in and out, but even if I hadn't had those sneak previews, I would have been quite surprised because he really marries that kind of slightly more ambient tape loopy world with a more traditional kind of landscape, soundscape kind of thing.
Give me that ring into my hand, and I will neither stay nor stand. It would do more good to me than 20 maidenheads.
And there's so many moments. When I heard this for the first time, I just kind of lay back on my couch and just put it in my headphones and listened to it from start to finish, which is the way everybody should listen to albums. And it was a really nice, immersive, transporting moment, and there was only a sense of being being in the album, being inside of it, and I kind of instantly wanted to do it all again. So that's kind of a sign of a good album. So I would recommend it heartily. I would not live always. It's true as well.